There exists a being seated on a throne beside the Almighty, carrying the divine name within himself, and the 66 books you read every Sunday refuse to pronounce him. The Hebrew tradition calls him Metatron. The Talmud trembles when it mentions him. Moses saw him on Sinai and remained alive. The 70 elders ate bread before him and returned breathing. Every time the sacred text says the angel of the Lord without giving a name, the ancient rabbis whispered the same word back: Metatron. Then something happened in the 3rd century that buried him. The Jewish sages realized that this figure was becoming far too dangerous to remain on the official pages. They erased the name. They did not erase the presence. Take the Bible that is on your shelf right now. Search from Genesis to Revelation. You will not find his name anywhere. 66 books, more than 30,000 verses. 0 mentions of Metatron. But open the Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Sanhedrin, page 38b. The name is there, written in ancient Hebrew, attributed to a being whom the rabbis described as second only to the eternal. Open the Tractate Hagigah, page 15a. The name appears again, this time linked to a controversy that shook Judaism for centuries. Open the Targumim, the Aramaic paraphrases read in synagogues since before Christ was born. The name appears once more, identifying exactly who the angel of the Lord is who speaks with Abraham, who appears to Moses in the bush, who guides Israel through the wilderness. The Bible you read hides this name on purpose. It is not a translation failure. It is not a lost manuscript. It is a deliberate editorial decision made almost 2,000 years ago by sages who feared what this name could provoke in the minds of the faithful. And their fear had real biblical foundation. In Genesis 16, Hagar flees from Sarah into the wilderness. A being appears on the road. The text calls him the angel of the Lord. Hagar looks at this being and says a sentence that should have shattered the entire theology of the time. You are the God who sees me. She saw an angel, but she called the angel God, and the sacred text does not correct her. In Genesis 22, Abraham stands with the knife raised over Isaac. The angel of the Lord calls to him from heaven, and immediately says, "Now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your only son from me." From me. The angel speaks as if he were God in the first person. In Exodus 3, Moses approaches the burning bush. The text says that the angel of the Lord appeared in a flame of fire. But 3 verses later, it is the Lord himself who speaks from within the bush. The same scene, the same being, 2 different names alternating as if they were the same reality. The ancient rabbinic tradition recognized the pattern long before the New Testament existed. This angel of the Lord was not just any messenger. It was a manifestation that carried full divine authority, spoke as God, received worship that only God could receive, and yet was distinct from the Father who sent him. The sages needed to give a name to this figure, and the name they chose was Metatron. The word is not originally Hebrew. Linguists debate whether it comes from the Greek metathronos, the one who is after the throne, or from the Latin metator, the one who measures and marks out paths. The rabbis preferred the first interpretation, the being whose place is after the throne, or beside it. The Jewish mystical literature called Merkabah, which studies the vision of Ezekiel's heavenly chariot, dedicates entire pages to this name. The Sefer Hekhalot, known as Third Enoch, describes Metatron with 70 different names, each one reflecting a facet of the divine name. 70 names. 70. The same number as the elders who ate before God in Exodus 24. It is not a numerical coincidence. It is ancient theological code. And here is the detail that changes everything. When the Christian translators of the Septuagint in the 3rd century before Christ translated the Hebrew Old Testament into Greek, they encountered this problem. How do you translate angel of the Lord without revealing who he really was? They left the expression generic, without a proper name, without clear identification. The Bible you read today in Portuguese, in English, in any modern language inherited that decision. The name was left out. The presence remained on every page. Every time you read the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament, you are reading about him. Every time a celestial being speaks with divine authority without being explicitly named as Yahweh, it is him. Every time a patriarch falls prostrate before a messenger and the messenger does not rebuke him as ordinary angels do in Revelation, it is him. How many times? The rabbinic counters found more than 50 appearances. 50 times this being walked through the pages of the scriptures without you knowing his name. 50 times you read about Metatron without knowing you were reading about him. And now the question that will hammer until the final chapter. If he was so important that he appeared in dozens of decisive moments of biblical history, why did the sages who organized the canon decide to erase his name? Exodus chapter 23, verse 20. Moses is on Sinai. The cloud covers the mountain. The Eternal speaks a sentence that modern translators rush past too quickly for you to feel its weight. Behold, I send an angel before you to keep you in the way. It sounds common. It sounds like any other celestial messenger. The next verse dismantles that impression. Take heed before him and obey his voice, and do not provoke him, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. My name is in him. In Hebrew, Shemi B'Kirbo. Literal translation, my name within him, in his inner being, at the center of his existence. No other celestial messenger in the scriptures receives this attribution. Gabriel does not receive it. Michael does not receive it. The seraphim of Isaiah and the cherubim of Ezekiel do not receive it either. Only this unnamed being carries the tetragrammaton within himself, and the Eternal adds a clause that should chill the spine of any attentive reader. This being will not forgive transgressions. The ability to forgive sin is the exclusive prerogative of the Creator according to all biblical theology. Christ himself in the Gospels provokes scandal precisely by claiming this power. But in Exodus, centuries earlier, the Father had already delegated this power to a figure who is not named. The rabbis of the Talmudic period fought exegetical battles around this verse. How can a celestial servant possess the divine name and yet still be treated as distinct from the Eternal himself? The solution came through an ancient technique called gematria. Each letter of the Hebrew alphabet has a numerical value. Aleph is 1, Beth is 2, Gimel is 3, and so on. When you add the values of the letters of a word, you find a number. Words with the same number, according to rabbinic tradition, share spiritual essence. The name Metatron, written in Hebrew, Mem Teth Tet Resh Vav Nun, sums exactly to 314. The name Shaddai, written in Hebrew, Shin Daleth Yod, also sums to 314. Shaddai is one of the personal names of the Eternal in the Old Testament. It appears 48 times in the scriptures. It is the name by which God revealed himself to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, according to Exodus 6, verse 3. It is the name used throughout almost the entire book of Job. Shaddai and Metatron share the exact same numerical value. For the ancient rabbinic mind, this was not mathematical coincidence. It was confirmation that the being of Exodus 23 literally carried the divine name within himself, and that this figure was the same one known in mystical literature as Metatron. The passage gains even greater depth when you cross it with the Targum Onkelos. the official Aramaic translation of the Pentateuch used in synagogues since before the Christian era. In Exodus 23, the Targum replaces angel with memra in some parallel traditions, an Aramaic word that means word or logos, the word of the Lord with the name of the Lord within it. Any Christian reader familiar with the Gospel of John feels the ground tremble here. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John was drawing from a tradition that already existed centuries before he wrote a single line. Let us return to Exodus. The chapter continues. Verse 22. If the Israelites obey the voice of this being, the Eternal will be an enemy to their enemies and an adversary to their adversaries. Obedience to the messenger is treated as direct obedience to the Creator. Rebellion against him is treated as rebellion against the heavenly throne. No ordinary servant receives this status. Only someone who acts in his own name while carrying the supreme name. And there is a linguistic detail that escapes all modern translations. The expression "do not rebel" in verse 21 is the Hebrew verb marah, the same verb used when the people rebel against Yahweh himself in Numbers 20. Rebellion against this figure receives the same legal weight as rebellion against the Heavenly Father. The Jewish sages reached an inescapable conclusion. This being was not an ordinary servant. He was the visible manifestation of the invisible, authorized to speak and judge with full authority. The most uncomfortable point of the chapter appears now. This manifestation had form, had presence, had an audible voice. He was visible, but the Eternal had explicitly said in another passage that no one could see him and continue breathing. How do you reconcile these two statements without destroying the coherence of the Scriptures? The answer of the rabbis would open one of the most disturbing discussions in the entire Hebrew tradition, a discussion that involves a banquet on top of a mountain, 70 elders looking at something no one should have seen, and a deliberate editorial silence about what exactly they beheld that day. And what they saw that day opens the only window the Bible offers to the face of the one who carries the name. Exodus chapter 33, verse 20. The Eternal speaks to Moses with a sentence that seemed to close the matter forever. You cannot see my face, for no man shall see my face and live. Definitive, categorical, without loopholes. And yet 9 chapters earlier, the same book of Exodus records something that should be logically impossible. Exodus chapter 24, verse 9. Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel went up, verse 10. And they saw the God of Israel, verse 11. And he did not lay his hand upon the chosen ones of the children of Israel, but they saw God, and they ate and drank. 74 men. They looked upon the God of Israel. They ate bread before him. They drank in his presence. And they came down the mountain alive. The contradiction is so blatant that rabbis, early church fathers, and medieval theologians wrestled for 2,000 years trying to harmonize these two passages. 3 options were on the table. First option, the text contradicts itself and the editors did not notice. An unacceptable solution for any tradition that considers the Scriptures inspired. Second option, the elders saw only a symbolic representation and not God himself. A solution that collides with the crystal clear Hebrew of the verse. The verb ra'ah used there is the same as in any real and literal seeing. Third option, they saw the Eternal, but they did not see the inaccessible Father. They saw the manifestation the Father uses when he must be seen. The Jewish sages called this manifestation the Shekinah. The word Shekinah does not appear in the Hebrew Old Testament itself. It was coined by the rabbis from the root shakan, which means to dwell, to reside, to make one's abode. every time the sacred text says that the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle, or that the cloud descended upon the mountain, or that the fire appeared above the ark, the rabbis identified the Shekinah acting there, the presence of the invisible made visible. The puzzle begins to close precisely at this point. Jewish mystical literature, especially the Sefer Hekkelot and the texts of the Merkabah school, explicitly identifies the Shekinah with Metatron in several passages, as functions of the same being. Metatron is the form the Eternal assumes when he must be looked upon by human eyes without destroying those eyes. The banquet in Exodus 24 takes on a new meaning. The 74 men did not see the Father in his absolute essence. They saw his visible manifestation. They saw the one who carries the divine name within himself. They saw the being Exodus 23 had just described 3 chapters earlier. The rabbis had no doubt about this. The Targum Pseudo-Jonathan, in translating Exodus 24, makes a significant theological adjustment. Instead of saying that the elders saw the God of Israel, the Targum says they saw the glory of the God of Israel. In other versions, the word Yekara, which means manifested splendor. They were not changing the meaning. They were preserving coherence. The elders saw the splendor that can be seen, and not the hidden Father who kills whoever beholds him directly. There is an even more disturbing detail in this passage. The text describes what was beneath the feet of the one they saw, like a work of sapphire stone and like the heavens in their clarity. Feet. The being had feet. He occupied physical space. He stepped upon something that resembled a platform of transparent blue sapphire. Compare this with Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 26. The prophet describes the heavenly throne and says that above the throne there was a likeness with the appearance of a man. The same figure, feet standing upon sapphire, human form seated upon the throne. The resemblance is exact, and the rabbis perceived it. The one seated in Ezekiel is the same one who stands upon sapphire in Exodus. And the one who stands upon sapphire in Exodus is the one who carries the name of the Eternal in Exodus 23. And the one who carries the name is Metatron according to the whole Hebrew mystical tradition. The vision converges, but the theological problem deepens instead of being solved. If the elders saw a being with human form with feet, with measurable presence, and this being was the manifestation of the Eternal, then the Eternal already had human form before the incarnation recorded in the Gospels. The early Christian tradition seized this clue with force. Justin Martyr in the 2nd century argued that every theophany of the Old Testament, every visible appearance of God to the patriarchs, was in reality the pre-incarnate manifestation of the Word. The same figure the Jews called Metatron, the first Christians identified as Christ before Bethlehem. This is not popular theology. It is an argument documented in manuscripts from the 2nd and 3rd centuries of the Christian era. And the point that unites the two traditions is exactly this banquet on the mountain. 74 men beholding the visible form of the invisible, eating bread before the one who governs the universe, coming down alive to tell the story. The text closes with a sentence that sends a shiver. And he did not lay his hand upon the chosen ones. The hand could have been laid upon them. The privilege of living was granted by choice and not by right. They received the grace of seeing what no one can see because they saw through the mediator authorized to make visible what normally destroys. This mediator walks through the scriptures with defined form, feet upon sapphire, throne beside the supreme throne, divine name within him. And the next question that hammers rabbinic tradition is perhaps the most scandalous of all. Who, originally, is this being who can be seen without killing the one who sees him? The answer hides one of the oldest and most censored stories in Hebrew literature. A story about a man who walked with God on earth and never came back. Genesis chapter 5, the most monotonous genealogy in the Bible. Adam begot Seth, Seth begot Enosh, Enosh begot Kenan. Generation after generation, age after age, all end with the same clinical sentence. And he died, and he died, and he died, until verse 24. And Enoch walked with God, and he was no more, for God took him. Enoch did not die. The text does not say he expired. It does not say he was buried. There is no tomb, no family lament, no record of death. He simply vanished while walking with the Eternal. The canonical Bible leaves the account exactly like that. 5 lines, an interrupted genealogy, and silence. The ancient Hebrew tradition did not accept that silence. The rabbis knew something enormous had happened in that instant. A human being had been taken alive from the earth by the Creator. Where was he taken? And what happened after he arrived there? The answer came through a book called Sefer Hekala, in Portuguese, Book of the Palaces. Modern scholars call it Third Enoch. It was compiled between the 3rd and 5th centuries of the Christian era, but it preserves Jewish oral traditions far older, possibly earlier than Christ himself. And here it is necessary to pause so that the honest ear knows exactly what it is about to hear. What comes next is not in the Bible. It is in the Sefer Hekala, an extra-canonical Jewish mystical book. It is the way the ancient rabbinic tradition chose to fill the silence that Genesis 5 left open. It is not inspired word. It is the interpretive memory of a people who refused to let Enoch disappear without explanation. And what this book describes is one of the most disturbing narratives in all world religious literature. Enoch arrives at the heavenly throne. The Eternal receives him, and a transformation begins. Enoch's skin is exchanged for flames, his bones become embers, his eyes turn into torches, his eyelashes into lightning, his hair into dancing fire, his body expands until it reaches the width of the whole world and the height of the whole world. 72 wings sprout from him, each pair able to cover entire continents. 365,000 eyes open in his transfigured form, and each eye simultaneously beholds all creation. And then the Eternal proclaims a new name over him. I call you Metatron, my servant. This is the literal account of the Sefer Hekala, from chapter 9 to chapter 13. An ordinary man, descendant of Seth, transformed into one of the most powerful creatures in the heavenly universe. The text continues. The Eternal goes on granting Metatron honors that no other being ever received in Jewish tradition. 70 divine names are engraved upon his crown. Each name corresponds to one aspect of the ineffable name of the Father. Whoever invokes any one of these 70 names invokes the Eternal through Metatron. A throne is built beside the supreme throne, not above, not below, beside. And the Eternal calls Metatron by the name that would make the prophets tremble, Yahweh Hakatan. In literal English, the lesser Yahweh, the smaller Yahweh. The title is written that way in Sefer Hekala, chapter 12, in clear letters. The rabbis of the Merkava school taught this name for centuries. Yahweh Hakatan, the divine name applied to a being who was originally a human patriarch of the 7th generation after Adam. The Hebrew tradition did something that sounds impossible to modern Christian ears. It allowed a man to become a visible extension of the Eternal. And there are parallels in the Old Testament itself that sustain this reading. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5, the New Testament confirms that Enoch was translated so that he would not see death. The Greek word used is metatithemi, which means transferred, transposed, removed to another place of existence. He did not die, he was transferred. Jewish tradition simply went further by specifying where he went and what happened afterward. Daniel chapter 7, verse 13, offers a scene that fits perfectly with this transformation. The prophet sees one like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven and approaching the Ancient of Days. This son of man receives dominion, glory, and kingdom. All the peoples of the earth serve him. Son of man, human form approaching the throne, receiving authority that only the Eternal could grant. Medieval Jewish commentators repeatedly identified this figure with Metatron. Christian commentators identified the same figure with the Messiah. Both looked at the same verse and arrived at parallel readings that overlap at critical points. Son of man elevated into the divine sphere, human form seated upon a heavenly throne, total authority delegated by the one who cannot be seen. The rabbinic mystical tradition developed the doctrine of Enoch Metatron in increasingly dense layers during the centuries that preceded the Christian era. The Dead Sea Scrolls discovered at Qumran in the 20th century revealed fragments of Enochic literature that circulated among the Essenes at the exact time when Christ was born. The figure of the patriarch elevated to angelic status was not an obscure niche. It was a doctrine widely discussed in the Judaism of the Second Temple period, and here arises the most serious theological problem of this doctrine. If a human being can be elevated to this level of heavenly authority, receiving the divine name and a throne beside the supreme throne, what does this mean for the hierarchy of the eternal beings who were in heaven before creation? Michael has been archangel since before the foundation of the world. Gabriel has delivered divine messages for immeasurable ages. The seraphim of Isaiah have existed since the dawn of creation. All these heavenly beings were created before Adam breathed the first breath. But Enoch, transformed into Metatron, surpassed all of them in position and authority. What kind of heavenly hierarchy allows the last to arrive to sit above those who were there from the beginning? The answer to that question shook the rabbinic courts for more than a millennium, and exposes a title that places Metatron in a category isolated from everything that exists between heaven and earth. The heavenly hierarchy has strict rules in Hebrew tradition. Each angelic being has a defined position, a specific function, a delimited territory of action. Michael commands the heavenly armies. His name means who is like God, and he appears in Daniel chapter 10, verse 13. Fighting against the spiritual prince of Persia. In Revelation chapter 12, verse 7, he leads the war against the dragon. Gabriel transmits revelations. His name means strength of the eternal. It was he who explained the visions to Daniel, announced the birth of John the Baptist to Zechariah, and brought to Mary the news that would change human history. Above these two, tradition recognizes other archangels with elevated offices. All serve before the throne. All execute direct orders from the eternal at decisive moments in history. And all of them stand. This detail seems insignificant, but it is the exact point where Metatron separates himself from the entire known angelic hierarchy. Angels do not sit before the throne. They remain standing as servants awaiting orders. This is the posture of the heavenly servant throughout all Jewish mystical literature. Only one being has permission to sit. Sefer Hekalot. Chapter 10 records the title with precision. Sar HaPanim, the Prince of the Face, the Minister of the Presence. In Hebrew, panim means face, but it also means presence. To stand before the face of the Eternal is to remain continually in his direct presence. Without mediation, without veil, without filter. No other heavenly being received this permanent access. Michael approaches the throne at specific moments. Gabriel is sent on defined missions. Raphael executes assigned tasks. All return to their positions after fulfilling the orders. Metatron remains, always, without interruption. Isaiah chapter 63 verse 9 offers the biblical confirmation that the rabbis identified as the key to this doctrine. In all their affliction he was afflicted, and the angel of his presence saved them. The angel of the presence. In Hebrew, Malach Panav, literally the angel of the face of the eternal. It is the specific being who dwells continually before the divine face. The same figure the Sefer Hekalot identifies as Metatron, and the verse of Isaiah adds a detail that changes the understanding of salvation in the Old Testament. It was this angel, the Prince of the Face, who saved Israel in all the afflictions of the Exodus, of the wilderness, of the battles. It was not Michael, it was not Gabriel, it was Metatron, the rescue operation of Israel through the Red Sea, the pillar of fire during 40 years in the wilderness, the victory at Jericho when the walls fell. Each of these interventions, according to the ancient rabbinic tradition, passed through the hands of the Prince of the Face. The Talmud in Tractat Sanhedrin, page 38b, records a fundamental debate about this authority. Rabbi Naaman argues with a skeptic about the existence of a heavenly being intermediate between the eternal and humanity. The skeptic argues that such a being would imply two divine powers. Rabbi Naaman responds by citing exactly Exodus chapter 23, verse 21, about the being who carries the name of the eternal. The rabbinic answer is clear. This being is not a parallel God. He is the authorized instrument of the one deity. But even so, he occupies a position that no other inhabitant of heaven can claim. The Merkaba mystical literature develops this hierarchy in detailed layers. There are 10 angelic orders in heaven according to this tradition: cherubim, seraphim, ophanim,